William McIntosh Davies.
Good afternoon.
A man who reached the playoffs 5 times in 7 years between 2005 and 2011, but hasn't had a job since. How could a manager with so much success have such a poor managerial career, ending when he was just 48 years old? The Billy Davies story is one of glory, one of tragedy, and maybe even one of comedy. But before we can get into that, let's set the scene for his first success, and his first hilariously tragic moment. Davies would take Preston on a 25-game championship unbeaten run, confirming a spot in the playoffs. Coming up against one of the best sides in championship history, an unlucky 1-0 loss forced a second season in the championship. The year after, he made another playoff run, this time facing Leeds in the semi-final. After he left Ellen Road following a first leg draw, he gave the quote, "job done," to the media, only to lose at home and then be knocked out of the playoffs. The season after, he'd reached the playoff final again, but this time it was with Derby County and he would win promotion.
And for you, a Premiership manager.
Well, go enjoy the night. Let me just...
Unfortunately for him though, it was his team that only won 11 points in the Premier League the season after. Davies would not finish this season, and on the last day of 2008, the year after, Davies would move to Derby's East Midlands rivals Nottingham Forest. Taking over a newly promoted team from League One, Davies' first game in charge was a 3-0 win against the just taken over Manchester City. While he wasn't in the dugout for this game, it really did set the tone of what was to come on Trent's side. By the end of that season, Forest was safe, and as a reward, Forest's chairman Nigel Doughty would finally fund the signing of some much needed signings. With a pretty ridiculous 6 strikers signed in one window, no one quite knew how Forest would fare that season. It was safe to say that Forest would play well, but would struggle to get the results that many thought their performances deserved. This form totally flipped at the end of September though, with Forest going on an 18-match unbeaten run, including 10 wins, 5 of which came in a row. Forest would climb the table rapidly and were in a playoff position by the end of November. After confirming their spot in the build-up to the playoffs, Davies would rest his squad in a game against Blackpool.
Let's find out how Blackpool's pursuit of a playoff place in the Championship is coming along. Ian Holloway called this the biggest game of his player's career.
And it's going to plan for Ian Holloway and his men. They lead 3-1. Nottingham Forest, I must say, have been weakened today. 5 changes by Billy Davies' men, but they have been under par. Blackpool doing their bit to try and get themselves into the playoffs. It's Blackpool 3, Nottingham Forest 1.
I had mentioned that Billy Davies' story had quite a lot of comedy. Well, this is really where it starts. In that loss a few weeks before the playoff semi-final, Blackpool striker Gary Taylor-Fletcher has said,
and he was stood in a tunnel and he was rubbing his hands and he was like, "job done for me." And we were like, "Oh, shut up, Billy." He said, I've done this so we get used in the playoffs, you know. We get used in the playoff semi-final, we're guaranteed in a final.
It's quotes like this that give you a view into the man that Davies was. His plans were always extravagant, and honestly, they worked quite a lot of the time. His unbeaten runs were always planned, his team rotations, his squad depth and his training, they all worked perfectly, and that's really why his success came. But then his ego would get in the way. Blackpool would beat Forest 2-1.
And again, I don't know what he was thinking, but he was stood in a tunnel, shaking his hands, "job done, 2-1, you ain't scoring at our place, we're going to turn you over." Wes Morgan, who obviously Leicester, he said like he lost them that game.
Blackpool would go on to score 4 in the second leg, with Forest losing 6-4 on aggregate.
We all waited in a tunnel, and he come in and we were rubbing our hands saying, "Job done, Billy, cheers mate, see you later."
That summer, ambition doubled at the club, as Billy Davies himself admits Forest nearly signed Gareth Bale.
And whether Gareth Bale's available or not, then I've got to say I do have great admiration for the lad and think he's a wonderful player.
I don't know if this ambition was a little bit too much for Billy Davies, because it was around this time he started referring to himself in the third person, so it really did look like things were getting to his head. His second full season at Forest was also very successful, but as usual for Billy Davies, not everything would go his way. After yet again reaching the playoffs with Forest, this time they would draw Swansea City, and there was an early red card that usually would result in the other team attacking. But despite Swansea getting a second-minute red card, it didn't affect the game. Davies would see his star striker Robert Earnshaw head in at the far post, Chelsea Dagger would blast off the City ground sound system, only for the linesman's flag to get raised for offside. Billy Davies then decided to drop Earnshaw for the second leg. Davies was stubborn, and this time his plan didn't work. He was tactically outmatched by Brendan Rodgers, and you could safely say that Davies could easily have had the career Rodgers went on to have. And for almost everyone Trentside, this second playoff loss was just too much. His abrasiveness hadn't earned him too many fans in the Forest boardroom, and his time as manager would be over. Despite his many flaws, the majority of the Forest fans would still back Davies as a better manager than his next few replacements.
Good afternoon, Forest fans. The last time I stood here, we were in the playoff semi-final, heading for the Premiership. That is why I'm back. Unfinished business. Enjoy this next chapter for the Reds.
After Fawaz Al-Hassawi joined the club, which is a video all by itself, just 20 months later, he organised the return of Billy Davies. Claiming his second tenure would match Alex Ferguson for success, it honestly looked like Fawaz had finally made the right decision. And Forest would go on to win 6 of the next 7 games, with the other game being a draw. This run of form saw Forest yet again surge towards the playoffs, and Davies had a chance to make it for a 6th time on the final day of the season. But Forest would lose this game against Leicester, and this would be the final blaze of glory for Davies. On the pitch he was fantastic, but off the pitch things were really not going so well. Instead of the return of the king, Davies' second tenure was a long slog of bad decision after bad decision. He had near total control over the club, a true dictator which was rare at this time, which he used to fire long-term club employees. He berated a photographer for taking photos for the club's matchday programme after a game at Millwall, and even barred a few unfavourable journalists as part of a near media blackout. In 2023, Davies would appear in the media for a rare podcast episode. Inside it, he claimed that the best thing for a young player to do would be to block out the noise and focus on the game. Maybe this is how he truly feels about modern football, but everything could have changed had King Billy not cared about being the ruler of the club. If you really want to sum Davies up, just know if he ever returns to football, he's still got 3 games of a 5-match touchline ban to serve. A ban he received for strong language against the referee in a game that his team won. A certain level of manager power is very healthy. Clough had near total control of Forest in the 80s, Platt had too much in the early 2000s, but Davies needed to manage every single aspect of the club. Unfortunately for him, this just wasn't how modern football operated anymore. It's clear that he is one of the best managers in Championship history, but one of the worst when it comes to diplomacy and keeping people on his side. And that is the story of how Billy Davies was the best manager that no one will ever hire again. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing, sharing the video and liking it. These will all help the channel out, and I've got some videos coming out weekly that I know you'll really enjoy. But until then, make sure you refer to yourself in the third person in every conversation, start saying it is what it is, and come on you Reds.